And I'm going to call this meeting to order. We do not have a quorum, but we will begin our testimony anyway. And so today I would like us to look at some of the provisions that are in both of the bills that have some policy differences and actually discuss the policy, get feedback from stakeholders, and then contemplate which language we should take. And so first up on the agenda was the Washington Avenue Bridge. And so if I could get Brendan, Judd, and Alice. Or whoever else is coming from the stakeholders. So this is a provision in the bill. It's about the Washington Avenue requires grants to the University of Minnesota for design and construction of barriers on Washington Avenue Bridge. There are debates about where this funding should be coming from. And so we just wanted to get an update on the project about how much it would cost and then what the proper funding source is. So we're going to keep our discussion limited to those topics. And so welcome to the committee. Whoever would like to go first, please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Cagle, Chair Kosnick, and Chair Dibble, and members. For the record, I'm Alice Roberts-Davis. I'm Vice President for University Services at the University of Minnesota. And the Washington Avenue Bridge is a very busy bridge that straddles the Mississippi River and connects the east and west banks of the University of Minnesota campus in Minneapolis. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about it today because it has been an ongoing source of concern for us. The bridge itself is a double-deck structure with a lower deck for vehicles and light rail trains and upper deck for approximately 20,000 pedestrians and 7,000 cyclists every single day. Hennepin County owns the bridge, and the university maintains certain pedestrian-level elements, including the enclosure and the bridge and lighting that both span the entire deck of the bridge. Tragically, this has been the site of numerous mental health crises over the years, including 2 deaths by suicide just this past fall. The pedestrian level of the bridge has safety railings, but they're low and easily scaled. They need to be higher, and we need true barriers to prevent suicide attempts. Studies do show that suicide deaths at locations decrease significantly after the installation of barriers. So to date, the university has spent roughly $78,000 on temporary barriers, and we just signed another contract for $25,000 to keep the fencing in place for another 12 months. It's very basic, just chain link fencing that goes across the span of the bridge. Those costs that I mentioned do not include any of the pre-design work that we've already completed on new railings and lighting and other security enhancements. And we are looking for financial support for a permanent solution on the bridge. We know how to build them. We've already got a design in place. We just don't have the funding, but we would work with the suicide prevention advocates to ensure that we have the best possible design. We estimate the cost of the suicide deterrent barriers to be at $8 million, and that would be for full design and construction, which would include a new railing system, improved integrated lighting, surveillance, signage, and related site and utility improvements. We would lead the process with working with Hennepin County to get all of the necessary approvals and permitting, and nothing about the general maintenance agreement on the bridge is proposed to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. If you could just state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Cagle and members. My name is Lisa Cerny. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for the Public Works line of business with Hennepin County. As Vice President Roberts-Davis stated, the Washington Avenue Bridge is a critical state and regional asset. It is complex and complicated, as a bridge typically is. It also has many needs. The bridge connects the East and West Bank campuses with cars, buses, and light rail on the lower level, and pedestrians and cyclists on the upper deck. The state originally built the bridge in the 1960s with input from the University of Minnesota on the pedestrian decking. MnDOT transferred jurisdiction of the bridge to Hennepin County in the late 1990s, and the university has maintenance responsibility as stated for parts of the pedestrian deck. We support the university's request for state funding for this project. County engineers have been coordinating with the University of Minnesota to provide technical expertise to ensure the structural integrity of the bridge and overall safety for all users is met. We are continuing to work together with the suicide prevention advocates to expedite the work and make sure the work is aligned with what their best guidance is. This is a unique multi-jurisdictional project that will have regional and statewide impact. We have supported the university's request for the financial support in the bonding bill, and we have requested federal community project funding as well for the project in support of the university and the SAVE organization. The House bill would dedicate $9 million of Hennepin County's active transportation funding to the University of Minnesota to fund the project. This funding is currently committed for safety and accessibility improvements in the county's CIP program for various different projects throughout the county related to construction and rehabilitation projects that is on our county road and bridge system. Some of those improvements are things like pedestrian ramps, accessible pedestrian signals, safer bike and pedestrian facilities throughout the county. Using $9 million from the county's active transportation funds for the bridge would significantly delay and potentially cancel some of those construction projects, jeopardizing previously awarded federal funds and driving up costs. In order to expedite the Washington Avenue Bridge project, we would request using a different state funding source. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kearney.
Cerny.
Cerny, thank you. So, question, what do you both think would be the appropriate funding source? Because I believe, nobody questions the merits of this project. It's just a matter of figuring out, how we're going to get the money to you guys. And so, is there a preference between the House and Senate language? Putting you on the spot here, huh? Just not,
Sure.
and maybe if I can ask fiscal staff, between the two approaches, so if we were to take it from the Hennepin County House provision side, what is the balance in that account or the money that comes from that account, Mr. Lee?
Madam Chair and members, the House approach would take from Hennepin County's share of the 0.75% metro area sales tax. Of that total, 17% goes to counties. Hennepin County's share of that is about $34 million in fiscal year 2025 and about $37 million in fiscal year 2026. Within that, there's also a requirement that a certain percentage be spent on active transportation and safety studies, which is what the House language specifies that the amount should come from. And in fiscal year 2025, that amount is about 16.6 million a year. And so.
Thank you. And Ms. Cerny, then that 16.6 is spoken for in Hennepin County, I'm assuming?
Chair, members, yes, we have committed those dollars in our 5-year CIP to various projects throughout the county. Some of those cities include, let me get my list here, the City of Minneapolis, projects within the City of St. Louis Park, Maple Grove, Golden Valley, Plymouth, Minnetonka, and Brooklyn Park. And if the dollar amount was reduced, we'd have to rebalance and understand what the broader impact would be.
Thank you. Would Senate Council be willing to do the same? If you could walk through your fiscal approach and then tell me what the funds are in that account, that'd be great.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. On the Senate side, the funds for that $9 million are coming from the Metropolitan Council share of the regional transportation sales and use tax. So that's 83% of the funds, but specifically from the 5% of that 83% that is dedicated to active transportation, and that technically goes to the Transportation Advisory Board as a pass-through. And I believe that amount for the Metropolitan Council for the calendar year, which would encompass fiscal year 26, is roughly $40 million for that amount total.
Okay, thank you very much. Any discussion or questions from members? Mr. Chair.
Thank you. My apologies to Mr. Lee. Could you again explain the what it means by the Hennepin County allocation. I wasn't totally tracking on which pot of money that is, so. just
Mr. Lee?
Take it from the top. Thanks.
Mr. Lee?
And I'll listen really, really closely.
Mr. Chair and members, so of the metro area sales tax, the 0.75, and that all counties are eligible to receive part of the 17% of that.
Oh, the 17%.
And
All
so
right.
within that, Hennepin County share.
I see. Okay, now I understand.
And then with the 41.5 going to active transportation, so it cuts that in half to 16 million then. So we'd be taking almost over half of Hennepin County's active transportation money for that bridge.
Right, okay, got it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
No, it's over
Oh,
here.
sorry. Senator Johnson.
Are we
Stuart
allowed to
and
ask
Stuart
questions?
Johnson. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Madam Chair, my question is for Ms. Cerny. I know of at least the project that you're talking about that runs through Minnetonka has some federal matching funds, and my question for the testifier is how much federal matching funds? Is it half of that 9 million? How much would be in jeopardy if, in fact, we use that money instead of the projects that have already been approved for federal match? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Cerny?
Chair and Senator, could you ask that question one more time to make sure I'm understanding? Are you just asking about the federal portion for that one project or potentially all of those projects?
No, I'll just ask it like you and I are just talking to each other. If we don't use that money for if instead of funding the projects that you listed, because you have to reallocate, how much are all of those projects eligible for federal funding? And so would we assume a 50% match, or how much federal funding match would we lose if we're not if we're not going to be using your active transportation account for those projects, and instead putting them towards the Washington Avenue Bridge? Madam Chair.
Ms. Cerny?
Chair, Senator, thank you for rephrasing. I'm not going to be able to answer that question with all of the detail, but I can share, in general, the county seeks to get federal funding as a match to all of our reconstruction projects with generally a cap of about $7 million per project. And so depending upon the various different funding sources for each of those projects, you could say there's at jeopardy roughly probably $4 to $7 million per project in each of those cities that has the potential to be impacted, because the new active transportation funding is funding that we have found incredibly beneficial to match federal projects and make federal projects score very well in the region.
Thank you. Any further questions? Chair Koznick.
Thank you, Chair Cagle. And I didn't quite catch your name, Ms. Cerny for Hennepin County. Thank you. Are there funds that Hennepin County currently has, whether it's the half-cent sales tax, the new part of the sales tax that was mentioned here in either of these proposals? Are you prohibited from using any of those funds to fix this project currently? Like, do you need state approval to fix this issue?
Ms. Cerny.
Chair, Senator, if I'm going to rephrase your question to make sure I'm understanding it, and give me a nod if I've got it. If not, correct me, get me down the right path. I think your question, if I understood it, is does Hennepin County need state action in order to fix or modify the railings? And the simple answer is no.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ms. Cerny, I appreciate that. That's my understanding as well, is that Hennepin County has a variety of pots of money, and we just need to decide which pot to use. And you really don't need legislative approval. We've had vigorous debate about this in the House, to my surprise, through the House Transportation Bill as it proceeded. In fact, we had a 15-0 committee vote on the original source that we had. Do you know the original source, I believe, when it was in the House, and fiscal staff, or correct me if I'm misspeak, but it's the 0.5% of the transportation tax that's available to all the counties, optional tax.
Ms. Cerny.
You could use those funds, and what is the current balance in those funds, of that funds?
Ms. Cerny.
Chair, Senator, I don't have off the top of my head the balance, but we generally seek to spend every dollar that we have in the year that we have it in order to maintain our infrastructure and keep it in a condition of good repair. Maybe to go back and clarify, Hennepin County doesn't need state direction to make the repair. The benefit of state bonding or another source outside of the Hennepin County is what helps us accelerate that. So we today do not have the railing replacement for the Washington Avenue Bridge in our CIP, just to be very clear about where our funding is committed to date.
And Madam
Chair
Chair?
Kosnick?
Thank you. My understanding is somewhere in that original optional sales tax of 0.5% before the new tax that was the 23 tax, somewhere over $200 million, maybe $240 million that is available for all transportation purposes. Now, this has been an ongoing issue for many years. I don't know why it's not prioritized within your system. I recognize that there are other projects trying to meet federal dollars and other things, but this, to me, seems like it should be a priority, and it should be kind of embarrassed that it's not in your CIP or planning.
Chair Kosnick, we're not going to go
Yes, we
down
are.
that. No, we are not going to do that. We are focusing on the issue. We are focusing on what the funding source is. We're not going to start berating counties about this. We're focusing the discussion on the funding source. So please don't impugn motives or talk about people's priorities.
Well, Madam Chair, respectfully, there is
Chair
plenty.
Kosnick.
There is plenty of pots of money that are available. This has been an ongoing issue. We've talked about it in committee. This is the first time this particular testifier has come forward, and it's kind of been lurking in the background. And I'm sorry, I do think it's embarrassing that this hasn't
Chair
been
Kosnick,
issued.
we will not be using language like that. We are not going to impugn motives or
I'm
talk.
sorry if you think the word embarrassing is
We're talking about
offensive
the
to you.
funding source. If you don't have anything to say about that, then we can move on.
Well, my point, Madam Chair, is that there are a variety of pools of money that Hennepin County has at its disposal. It does not need the legislature to tell them to use that, but for inaction and lack of prioritizing it. And now it has come to the legislature. It came, again, at a 15-0 roll call vote in the House. And I prefer the House language. We took an amendment from one of our members on the floor. And I'll just share with the committee that would be, I would advocate that be the conference committee's position.
Thank you. Chair Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I take a fairly agnostic view on the funding source, other than I think my idea is the best idea. But, you know, to Representative Kosnick's point, you know, we just need to decide. There's, you know, obviously there's money available for this purpose. You know, and, you know, people who show up here to say, don't use my money, don't use my money, don't use my money, that's fine. It's what they do, you know. That's why we're paid the big bucks. We just get to make the decision because there's money and we just need to do it.
Yes.
You know, they're doing their jobs, they're protecting their pots of money. I don't think any major principle is at stake. I don't think any major precedent is at stake. We just kind of need to find the money, you know, and I do think my idea is best. It seems to impinge the least amount on a given program in terms of the proportion of money we're taking out of a given pot. But, you know, Representative Kosnick is right. I mean, I understand it's not in the CIP and there's a process at the local level. On the other hand, Hennepin County is collecting a quarter-cent or quarter-cent sales tax. You know, and there's a lot sitting there in the bank. You know, they're accumulating those funds for a capital contribution to Blue Line. I understand that. They don't want that affected. But, you know, that's, you know, those monies are available. The allocation of the 17% portion that goes to active transportation from the, you know, 0.75% sales tax in the metro, again, you know, has kind of a disproportionate effect, or, you know, that set aside from the 83%. Again, We just kind of need to do it. So I've made that point. The other point I want to get to, though, and really is a question for either of the testifiers, is there are some language differences. On the Senate side, we had included the notion of, even under the best of circumstances, going to take some period of time for the design and then the implementation, building these barriers. We have the temporary barriers in place now. As I'm given to understand from the proponents and the advocates, the temporary barriers don't quite do the job. They have had some success, and I think Ms. Roberts-Davis has talked about, having stopped a few incidents, but they're not as effective as we would hope, and so they were envisioning some improvements to that temporary barrier. There's some discussion about if that's even possible, and then so my question is leading up to, is partially, is it possible to make some improvements for the interim measures, number one. Number two, there's a lot of discussion about some engineering considerations that I don't completely understand, weight and, design issues. And so could we just spend a minute talking about kind of those 2 points? And then I had another question about house-only language. Thanks.
Go ahead, yes.
Madam Chair, Senator Dibble, thank you for the question. Yes, the university has brought forward some interim solutions that we propose that would include railings that would be attached to the existing railing that's already there, just to give it a greater height that would be less easy to scale than the fence that's currently there. We do, as non-owners of the bridge, have to go through Hennepin County for approvals and permits in order to implement any changes, and to this point, we have not been able to come up with a solution that is something that the county is willing to approve.
Thank you. Ms. Cerny, do you have anything to add?
Chair, Senator, as I stated earlier, Hennepin County is looking at the overall safety of the bridge, and therefore, as the university has brought forward options to attach something to the railing when we apply our engineering standards and our engineering guidelines, and we look at the broader risks for overall safety, we have not approved that. I do believe there are some other safety options that could be added to the existing temporary fence that could be applied in partnership with the university. But it's structurally not a sound idea to attach a railing and put a different risk to individuals.
Thank you, Ms. Cerny.
So-
Chair Dibble?
So I probably need to spend a little more time on that question, because, here we are now, a number of months later, and this conversation is still happening. And, if it is in fact the case that we're not, in the interim, preventing as many attempts as possible, and we're not moving with all due haste, that's, I think, distressing information and upsetting information to myself and the public. So I would like to understand, why we can't just get on with it and make as an effective interim solution while we're getting to the larger long-term solution. So I'll just let that rest for the moment. So maybe we can have a conversation in my office so I can appreciate the differences of perspective a little bit better. And then, in the Senate language, Madam Chair, we do ask for some consultation. This is for later when we get around to adopting the final language. We don't have to settle this question now, but I do think there's some merit to, making sure that there's some consultative requirement with persons affected by suicide at this bridge, suicide prevention organizations and experts in the field when we're getting to the final solution. And then I noticed in the House language, there's a requirement that suicide diversion information be located on site, so I assume that's in the form of signs and help and hotlines if the federal administration doesn't actually cancel all the funds for the suicide prevention, National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I hope that doesn't happen, because that's out there and proposed, and that would be a tragedy. But I assume that's what that is. Is that correct, Madam Chair? The suicide diversion information resources at the bridge?
I believe that's true.
Yeah.
Representative Hansen was the original author of this bill, and so I can check with him on exactly what the legislative intent is, but I'm assuming
Yeah,
that
I
would be the
think
case.
that would be an important
Yeah.
element to incorporate into the joint proposal.
Okay.
So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Any other, Representative Wilson, and then Representative Tappan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we can't just continually wait for a capital investment bill to come through. I think if we lost 2 individuals' lives last fall. Over the last 50, 60 years, we don't even know how many people have died on this bridge. Something has to be done. The bridge used to be owned by the state of Minnesota. It no longer owns it. It's now Hennepin County's. I think that that's an important precedent that we make sure that Hennepin County retains, whether we hand the money to Hennepin County or whether we hand it to the university for the Board of Regents, however we do it, it's their money. They should pay for what they own, unless we're going to send some, money which we don't have, right? That's the bonding bill. So I think it's important that as we're moving forward and looking at the language, we understand that this has to stop now. We have to ensure that this bridge is a safe bridge. Mm-hmm. I'll reiterate the fact that I used to run over that bridge every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with the United States Army ROTC program at the U of M. And I remember running in formation thinking, oh boy, those are really, really low railings, and I don't want to run next to those. And so this has to be done this year. We have to do it. And I think that the way that the House has it written provides an understandable way, and I was really excited to hear that it's going to cost $1 million less than what we have in the bill. So I definitely support the concept of doing something this year and making it done the right way.
Thank you. Representative Tapke.
Thank you, Chair Cagle. I had, in my notes after our last discussion in committee about this funding, this piggybacks off what Representative Olson said, is that I think we should have something in the language about if it does, because it is in the bond, hopefully in the bonding bill, if we get a bonding bill passed, we should put some unless otherwise allocated language in here so that this doesn't go into effect if we do get a bonding bill passed. Exactly how that works, I'm not 100% sure, but if we could do that, that would be good. And then secondly, I just want to advocate for the House position on this. I am a firm believer that the sales tax funding pot that we have put together, that funding mechanism, needs to stay whole, and it needs to stay whole as much as humanly possible so that we can build out and maintain and run a wonderful transit system in the metro, and making sure that we're keeping those money to meet our goals as whole as we possibly can. So I don't want to pull this out of the entire regional funding mechanism. I think it's appropriate to pull it out of Hennepin County and making sure that we're directing it there so that it's not a cost to the entire region on here. So if we were to pull it with the Senate's, just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, the Senate's language has it coming from the entire region. From everything in the House, we have it from the Hennepin County allocation from here. Is that accurate?
Staff? Yeah, Mr. Burrs?
Madam Chair, Representative Tapke, yes, I'd characterize that as reasonably accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Dibble?
Declare quorum.
Oh, yes. We have a quorum now, so I will officially call the meeting to order. Thank you.
So with the caveat that I'm agnostic, maybe I'm not as agnostic as I thought, I'll just make an argument for the Senate position, which is twofold. One is that while the Washington Avenue Bridge is owned by Hennepin County, the use of the bridge, which is, we're talking about the top deck, and that's very, very unique, in particular to the University of Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota actually contracts with Hennepin County to provide a lot of the elements, the covered pedestrian walkway, and and some of the other things that the University of Minnesota does, which is a state institution that places a lot of unique kinds of demands and uses of the bridge. Number one. Number two, if I could ask a sidebar question of Ms. Roberts Davis to remind us what the foot traffic and bicycle traffic is across that top deck?
Ms. Robert Davis?
Madam Chair, Senator, we have 20,000 pedestrians daily and 7,000 cyclists.
Mr. Chair?
And so, Madam Chair, I would venture that, less than half of those are, Hennepin County residents even. So, so I do think this is a state responsibility, and there's a state role. So maybe we can share the, share the pain, if you will. First position, doing it out of the bonding bill. And then if we're looking to these transportation-specific funds, maybe share the love, maybe take a little bit from the allocation that goes to the tab for the regional solicitation of active transportation, a little bit from active transportation portion of the 17% that goes to Hennepin County, maybe reach into Hennepin County's stash of reserve money. I don't know, but I do think there is a state role to argue for for this project. That said, trust me, we're not going to get hung up on this question.
No.
This is going to get done this year.
Yeah, this will get done.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Ms. Robert Davis?
Thank you, Chair. I just had two mechanics issues that I wanted to mention quickly. First is that as you do your work, we would just ask that any language that you come up with does have both lighting and railings, because the lighting is integrated into the railings, and so we aren't able to do one without the other. And I think that there's some difference in language between the two bills. The second thing that I would mention to Representative Tapke's point about the bonding bill is that Washington Avenue Bridge is not called out as a specific line item in the bonding bill. It's part of our HEPA request, and technically it's not HEPA eligible. We were seeking an exemption from MMB to use the funding for the Washington Avenue Bridge because it is not a university asset, but because it is a public asset, we were hoping that they would give us special dispensation. So if we get the language in this bill, the money, we would still want to have the money for HEPA because it was just a part of that HEPA pot. And so we would ask that that pot not be affected by any decisions that are made with this bill.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion, I appreciate your testimony, and we will move on to the next order of our topics here. So if we could get we will be discussing the Metropolitan Construction Project loan. This summary of this part is it authorizes Met Council to loan up to $250 million for a project that coordinates highway construction with one major transitway project. If we could get the Hennepin County Metro Council, Judd, and I don't know if you have anybody else. Okay, wonderful. So, Mr. Burris, would you be able to walk through the House language, please?
Madam Chair and members, so both House and Senate have a similar set of requirements at a kind of introductory level. This is found in the side-by-side on page R142, House Section 71, Senate Section 91. Both House and Senate have specified a authority for the Metropolitan Council to provide a one-time loan to the Department of Transportation for construction work in conjunction with a transitway project. Both House and Senate identify a loan amount of $250 million. And for both, there are some kind of general authority on use of the funds for any of the project costs. The House language has an effective date of day following final enactment, and that compares to the Senate position, which is effective July 1st, 2025. There are also some technical differences between the House and Senate as to the illustrative list of examples of project elements. There's also a technical aspect on the House side on application clause. Further, the Senate language includes a requirement that the loan must be zero interest.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. All right, we have Commissioner Dobbenberger and Judge Shetland. Welcome to the committee. If you'd state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Dibble, and Chair Kosnick, and conference committee members. My name is Nancy Dobbenberger, and I am the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Omnibus bill language that would authorize a funding partnership between the Met Council and the Minnesota Department of Transportation. The Metropolitan Council is advancing the F-Line arterial BRT project on Highway 65 in Minneapolis and Columbia Heights, and Highway 47 in Fridley, Spring Lake Park, and Blaine. Metro Transit has a full funding plan for the F-Line to start construction in 2028. MnDOT has identified this corridor as in urgent need of significant safety improvements due to the volume of vehicular and pedestrian crashes. As the road authority for the highway portion of the project, MnDOT has determined that the road needs to be reconstructed, but does not have sufficient funding to begin construction in 2028, the same time as the construction of the F-Line. The proposal will allow for concurrent highway and transitway construction, minimizing disruption, preventing rework, and reducing overall project costs. The benefits for safety, state of good repair, and multimodal accessibility will begin earlier by coordinating the projects. The project design, communication, and construction will be significantly more efficient than building two separate projects. MnDOT anticipates costs increasing by at least $10 million if our portion of the work has to be delayed until 2030 due to the rising prices of labor, materials, and other construction-related expenses. There would also be a cost of about $8 million due to duplicated project delivery efforts on design, right-of-way, outreach, and construction administration. Funds advanced by the Met Council would be repaid by MnDOT's Metro District over 10 years until repayment is complete. A 2030 start means an additional 2 years of construction interruptions in the corridor for a total of 5 years, which would impact commute times and access to local businesses. The Highway 65 reconstruction project will create safer walking and bicycling conditions along the corridor where we know there is a history of safety issues. Ensuring coordination with the F-Line project will also avoid more significant disruption for people who ride the bus. The corridor is in need of safety improvements. Approximately 37% of crashes result in injuries or fatalities on Trunk Highway 65, compared to 26% of crashes resulting in injuries and fatalities statewide. 9 intersections along Highway 65 have crash rates that exceed the critical rate, with 5 others approaching the critical rate. Authorizing this funding partnership with the Met Council on the F-Line Highway 65 project will minimize disruption to communities and the traveling public and lead to efficiencies in project design, communication, and construction. Thank you for allowing me to provide comments, and I stand for questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Mr.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Judd Shetland. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Metropolitan Council, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with Commissioner Dalbenberger. I think she did an excellent job explaining the initiative. I think this is a very good idea. It's a way for Met Council and MnDOT to work cooperatively to deliver a regional project in sync with each other, and also allow an opportunity to make sure that when we build the F-Line project that we don't stop that project after 2 years in order to bring the roadway construction effort in there. If we're able to do these concurrently, we think that it is great for the region, great for our riders, and especially those communities that would not have to see those construction delays over that period of time. So this is a unique opportunity for us with the regional sales tax. The reason why we're interested in doing this is because of the interaction with our transitway. And so if the legislature would see fit as to allow us to move forward with this, we'd very much appreciate it. I know we had some conversations recently about the Senate position related to the zero interest loan. I had a conversation with Mr. Greenfield yesterday to talk about that a little bit. I appreciate Senator Pratt brought that forward as part of the committee when this was heard in finance. And so I don't know when the appropriate time is to speak or discuss that, but I really do appreciate the committee's openness to this, and I think this is a great way for the Met Council and MnDOT to work together and really show our legislative partners that we can really deliver something great for this region together.
Thank you. So quick question here. In the House language, we kind of remained silent on whether there would be an interest rate or not. It's more specific in the Senate language. Does Met Council have a position on the language at all?
Well, Madam Chair and members, the House language is silent on it. I think what the House language is how we see it from Met Council and MnDOT is that we would work together on terms of a loan that would be fair to all parties. I think what Senator Pratt wanted to make sure is that one side of government wasn't making a financial gain on another side of government. We agree with that, and I don't think that the language that the House carries would do that. However, if there is some comfort language that is necessary, I think that we could work on that as long as it's part of the contractual obligation of the financial terms. So I think there may be something that we may have worked out already, but I really defer to Senate Counsel who is working on that.
Commissioner Dobbenberger, is there any position that MnDOT has on the on either Senate or House language?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. No, we do not have a particular position, but we would be happy to work with the Met Council on terms that we can both agree on.
Thank you. If you guys could just remain up there. I do believe there are some questions. Chair Dibble?
Thank you. I had passed out the A42 just as to frame up a little bit of our conversation today. Is not offering it, not proposing that it's even close to being a final draft proposal on this particular subject. Do you have that?
I do not.
All right, if we could ask the...
And I need my glasses too.
And Mr. Greenfield, if maybe you would like to walk us through the 842?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Conference Committee. The A42 amendment deletes the existing section on the Senate language relating to the authorization for the loan for the F-line project and spells out a little more detail as to the loan agreement and an accompanying document known as a project agreement that would specify the details of and the existing, the details and the final plan for the roadway and highway construction alongside the transitway project. So Section 91 is deleted and inserted as a new Section 91 that defines terms in paragraph A, including the loan agreement, which is the underlying promissory agreement for the up to $250 million loan, and then the project agreement, which is the planned and final design of Trunk Highway 65 in coordination with the construction of the F-line bus rapid transit project. So from a high level, this names the specific project, which is a separate and a difference from the language in both House and Senate positions. And then in paragraph B, the crux of the language from the existing bill is carried forward, but the Senate position is still carried on 1.17, that the loan must be zero interest. And then on 1.18 and 1.19, there are the specific project is identified as the highway construction on Trunk Highway 65, also known as Central Avenue, with the F-line bus rapid transit project. So making it as direct on the level of coordination in terms of what the loan is for. There is a repayment schedule beginning on line 1.20 of 10 years. On 1.21 to 1.22, there is a requirement that the funds from the loans may only be used for the pre-design, design, engineering, environmental analysis, and administration of the highway reconstruction project. Before using funds for construction purposes and right-of-way acquisition, both the council and MnDOT must jointly submit a project agreement, which is what I was referred to on 1.13 and 1.14, to the legislative committees. And that provides a design analysis to show the highway's compatibility with future transit and roadway investments and safe and accessible facilities for all modes of travel along the entire corridor. So before the MnDOT can commence construction and utilize the funds, they have to submit to the legislature kind of a project scope and analysis to show the coordination before proceeding with those final phases and shovels in the ground, so to speak. And then on paragraph E, beginning on 1.30 into 2.22, this provides the requirement that the loan agreement must be also submitted to the legislature. So this requires a public, a public disclosure, so to speak, of the loan agreement. 2.3 authorizes the loan only up until June 30th, 2027, so the end of fiscal year 2027, and then provides the same effective date as a final enactment as the House position. Then in section 92, this is a new section. This specifies the criteria for, the standards for repayment of the funds from the authorized loan. So this, on 2.11 to 2.12 is to what Mr. Shetnin was alluding to, the idea of a public interest provision for the repayment, that the loan agreement must not benefit either public entity. And then on 2.13 to 2.17 is a third legislative notification requirement from when the council receives payment from the Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Greenfield. So one note on this amendment, we don't identify the Highway 47 portion of it, because F line is going to be going up Central, cross 53rd, and then up Highway 47. And so we'll have to make the changes for language on that. Yes.
Madam Chair, in terms of full interest, I was just going off of what was publicly posted on the Metro Transit webpage. So it would be good to clarify whether that's both Highway 47 and Highway 65 from their perspective.
And Commissioner, yes, it is both Highway 65 and Highway 47, along with 53rd Avenue as well. Yeah. So, Mr. Shetnin.
I'm going to defer to Chair Dibble.
Okay, Chair Dibble.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to then just give a little bit of color commentary on the A42. So the goal of this language is twofold. One is, if we agree that different areas of government shouldn't be making money off of each other, that was the intent. That was an amendment brought in when we had our finance hearing. By Senator Pratt, and there was an indication from the Met Council that they could work with that language, and then more conversation with the Met Council around, the language that you find on page 2, that neither agency is going to financially benefit from one of the. So we've agreed that that's a sound public policy position. We're just trying to put a little bit more policy language around that. The details on what the project is and stuff, we can work that out if we think the A42 is a good approach. And then finally, this is kind of a unique, kind of first time kind of a thing. I strongly support this kind of conversation, interaction, relationship, cooperation, all that. So I think that's a good thing, but I also think there's a benefit to some public process, public disclosure. That's what some of these elements get to, as well as just really, putting the screws down a little bit tighter on the purposes and uses of these funds. So that's the goal of the A42.
Thank you. So with the A42, looking at lines 1.21 through 1.26, pre-design engineering, pre-design design, engineering, environmental analysis, and administration. So would that mean that there's no construction? The loan would not be for construction? Mr. Greenfield?
Madam Chair, can you repeat your question?
So in there, in line 2.21, it says the funds from the loan may only be used for the cost of pre-design, design, engineering, and environmental analysis administration. So does that exclude construction?
Madam Chair, the intent is to exclude construction from the first phase. So the idea is sequencing the amount of the loan, that the first phase of the project's development is initially authorized, but only upon the project analysis being submitted to the legislature can the MnDOT then be used for construction purposes. I will editorialize briefly and say the word construction purposes probably could be refined a little bit cleaner, but the idea was to kind of break up existing House and Senate language and kind of delineate to effectuate that notification requirement about how the project coordination would to be taken place before construction actually occurs.
Thank you. And then one other question on line 2.3. Authorization for the loan agreement expires on June 30, 2027. That has nothing to do with actually the money getting out. It's just a matter of the terms of the loan.
Correct.
Mr. Greenfield?
Madam Chair, that was the intent, that they just have to come to the agreement by the end of fiscal year 2027 so that the money can go out the door, not that the money has to be spent.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any, Senator Jazinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize, I must have missed it, or I might have missed it on the 0%. So assuming, and I don't know where the funds are coming in through Met Council or they're there, but so if the Met Council had those funds, $250 million is a lot, would you be losing interest on an investment account to do that? And I just want to make sure that's the net zero. So if you would be earning income on that money, then if MnDOT would pay 0%, you could technically be losing money on it. So I just want to make sure that it's fair on both sides. And maybe I missed the meeting about that, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page there, because again, I would assume you'd have investment income off that money if it's sitting there. Can you just talk a little bit about that? And maybe I missed it earlier.
Thank you. Judge, Mr. Shetland.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Jazinski, thank you for your question. That was what the Senate language originally said, and this is what we were working out over the course of the weekend to come up with a way where the council wasn't necessarily going to lose the ability to charge or to be able to work, charge some interest on this, but also make sure that MnDOT is able to get the benefit of moving their project forward, because they, as the commissioner stated, are saving significant amount of money by being able to do that in $2028 versus $2030 or whatever that is. So what I think Mr. Greenfield is proposing is language that allows us to come back to the legislature and explain how we're doing this in a way that is not going to basically provide financial gain to either party, but allow us to move forward with the project in a way where everybody is treated fairly and we can provide that loan.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Judd. I just want to make sure, I missed that portion. I just want to make sure that one party was not actually losing out on it, just it was net zero, and I think that makes sense. And I know Senator Pratt brought that up, but I was just thinking about making also that you didn't lose investment income off that to do that. I know there's an advantage to do it previously, and I really agree with not tearing up the area twice and getting it done, consolidating it together. It makes a lot more sense. A lot of times those construction projects have a lot of impact on businesses and people, so to coordinate the two makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to make sure we're net zero on as far as losing or gaining on any interest. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further, Representative Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that might be where the senator and I tend to disagree. This is all taxpayer dollars from either side. So if we spend it today, it doesn't cost as much, we can coordinate. I think it's a really creative idea, and I appreciate what the department and the Met Council are trying to do here. My question is, with this F-line bus rapid transit project, this whole conglomerate, is that going to be a total sum about $250 million, or is that just a placeholder number? Can we expand it? Can we do more with the same amount of money? Try and get more bang for our buck? I don't know, who is that, Commissioner? Maybe you have the answer to that?
Commissioner Dobbenberger?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. 250 is more of a placeholder amount. It should be less than that, and I would need to call upon my colleague Molly McCartney to talk a little bit more about the current cost estimate for the improvements on 65 and 47.
Would that be beneficial to you, Representative Wilson?
I would appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to come up, please. Welcome to the committee, Ms. McCarthy. If you could state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Cagle, Chair Kosnick, and Chair Dibble, and committee members. My name is Molly McCartney, work for MnDOT in the Metro District. I'm the Office Director for Planning, Capital Programs, and Transit. And I would extend my appreciation to the Met Council and Metro Transit for this partnership. As we're working on the roadway project to accompany the F-line, our estimate, we are bringing our own preservation dollars for roadway improvements and some safety improvements, but this will definitely let us advance and accelerate even more work throughout the whole corridor. And our overall estimates are about $120 million for the work we want to do from Minneapolis all the way to Blaine along the F-line corridor. We will bring some of our own district funds to that, but then the ability to borrow money from Metro Transit will greatly assist in that too.
Representative Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that. So $120 million, that's a far cry away from $250. In my mind, the efficiencies that we're saving here, if there's another project that the Met Council and the department is trying to work together on, my thought is that we shouldn't just limit the money from the funds of this loan to just one project. If there's a project that potentially has a sinkhole that needs to be filled or something like that, I think that potentially we should maybe expand the scope of this project to encompass that as well, because I think when we really get efficient, and knowing that something that's going to happen in 2030 or 2032 is going to be much more expensive than if we do it in 2025, 26, 27, we should maybe look for that. So I appreciate the answer, and now knowing that we maybe have $130 million extra in this loan, maybe we think about adding to that project.
Mr. Shetton.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. And Representative, I think that that's a good idea. I think that there is the opportunity potentially for us to do this, but what I want to make sure and let folks know that, you know, the council uses the regional sales tax for regional transit. So we want to make sure that that is our primary focus. So if we were to expand this to a second project, we would want to make sure that that project has a transitway purpose. I think that if trying to maybe think out loud here, if there was another project that could potentially be used, that this could be used, would be for potentially the Riverview corridor in St. Paul. But I would also add that if the committee was going to consider that, we would have to make sure that we work that through the language that is included in the amendment. And I've been talking with Mr. Rudin while we've been sitting here talking about the amendment, and there's just a few things that we'd like to make sure we have an opportunity to talk to the committee about, just a couple little nice tweaks that we'd like you to consider. But I think there is the possibility to do that, but that's really up to the legislature to decide.
And Mr. Shetton, so this loan is coming from Met Council reserves, correct?
Madam Chair, this is coming from reserves from the regional sales tax. And so to be clear, it would be coming from the regional taxpayer, not the state taxpayer.
Right.
I mean, they're all the same taxpayer, but it is coming from a pot that is not the state.
Thank you. And how long do you project Met Council will have substantial reserves or to be able to loan out?
Madam Chair, that's one of the reasons why this is very important for us to make sure that we work out the terms of the payment, because in the next 5-6 years, we are going to have a major capital cost that the council has to start paying for. In the 2023 budget bill, one of the things that was addressed was capital maintenance, and that had not been addressed previously. And so having those funds set aside allow us to keep our system in the state of good repair, which was one of the paramount issues that was dealt with in 2023. So for us, if this was not a loan, we wouldn't be standing here offering to do it.
Representative Tepke.
Thank you very much, Chair Cagle. I was all excited for a moment about everybody agreeing and getting to agree with Senator Jasinski on this, it is really important to me that we have this as at least the regional sales tax fund stays whole in doing this. Like it has to, there has to be whatever is lost in interest payments that would be coming in needs to be replaced via this loan and in the repayment of the loan. So that, to me, is very critical that that happens, because if we don't do that, then that's a direct reduction in funding that's available for transit via regional sales tax. That's what the regional sales tax is for. And so if we do not repay whatever is lost there, that is a direct reduction in what is available to be used for transit. So I just want to make sure that this zero interest piece, that we're all on the same page on this, or at least we're all discussing the same thing on this, that it cannot be a zero interest loan, that it has to be making sure that we're picking up the pieces that are the cost of this loan that is not available to transit, that we continue to maintain that. So I hope that makes sense on everything, but I'm very much against having this be a zero interest loan moving forward.
Thank you. Senator Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in alignment with making sure that we're keeping the regional funding, but I think the exciting part of this is that we're figuring out how to make government work better together, because, well, Central Avenue goes through my district and through Representative Cagle's district, and I know the Ideal Diner and others are very eager to have this done quickly. And I think this is the model that is going to allow us to expedite. And if we can keep it whole long-term, so figuring out how to keep it, what Senator Jasinski said, that's where I'm going to be advocating as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Clark. And I would like to then maybe just do a little plug for state government bill, the Infrastructure Council was created last term, and right now the House has it out of their bill. And so one of the things that Infrastructure Council would be focusing on is how to coordinate and collaborate on projects so that we don't have to dig up a road twice, or that we can do these transit and road projects at the same time. And so I would really hope that that's something that we can make sure the state continues to move forward on, and making sure that we have that collaboration and coordination throughout all of our assets, not just road and transit, but water, storm sewers, all the stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis. And so if anybody's on state gov in this room, go ahead and give them a plug. Any further discussion on this topic? Seeing none, thank you so much. And next up, we will be talking, everybody's excited for this one, the Resilient Pavement Program. Mr. Greenfield, would you like to walk through the comparison of the Resilient Pavement Program?
Sure thing, Madam Chair. Members of the Conference Committee, the Resilient Pavement Program is located on the side-by-side on R114. And there are a variety of both policy and appropriation differences. I can let my colleagues speak to the appropriation differences if you'd like in more detail, Madam Chair. But in terms of the comparison, the high-level policy overview between House and Senate positions, there are some definitions in terms of the definition of pavement cost that are carried in the House language that include the definition of pavement foundation, and the requirement that MnDOT standards developed by the commissioner are kind of incorporated as part of that specification requirement for the definition. In terms of how the program is administered, there is, I'd say, probably a technical difference that the House requires pavement foundation as part of the pavement design life, but the Senate language just refers to on R115 lines 99.20 and 99.21, requiring the commissioner to determine the pavement design life period using the current pavement design models and methodologies recognized by the department. So I think there's probably some technical differences in the wording choices that may have some more significant policy differences in terms of implementation. And then in terms of other policy differences, both the House and the Senate specify that it's for trunk highway construction, reconstruction, but the Senate takes the position on line 99.25 of R115 that the funds used for this the Resilient Pavement Program include rehabilitation projects. And then the cost-effective ratio to determine eligibility for the funds, the House and Senate have a difference, and that on R115, the House on 83.8 and the Senate on 100.2. It's a difference of ratio at least 2 for the House and a ratio of at least 1 for the Senate. And then on paragraph C on the Senate language, beginning on page 100, line 8 to 100.10, infrastructure projects funded by the established Resilient Pavement Program must incorporate certain research findings by the National Road Research Alliance and its partners. Then I believe that covers the differences on the Resilient Pavement Program, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I thought that, from my understanding, the Senate had put it into a program that already exists. Can you talk about the differences between that?
Madam Chair, that is correct. The appropriation is directed towards the long-term pavement program. Ms. Boyd can correct me and provide some more further specific fiscal details. The program that the Senate does appropriate its money to is not a creature of statute, so it is part of, as I believe the department can speak to, part of either its SRC or operations and maintenance programming. So that is not a creature of the legislature of where that money is being directed.
Thank you. All right, so if we have some testifiers that would like to speak on this. I know that we have Abby Bryduck and Joe Bagnoli, or Joe, do you want Dan LeBeau, if you would like to come forward? And maybe Commissioner Daubenberger, I have a question about the program, where that lives, so. Welcome to the committee. If you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, hi, my name is Abby Breiduck. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Asphalt Pavement Association. This bill was first heard in the House, and when it did have that hearing, we were not quite sure what to make of it. We were a little skeptical, but wasn't quite sure what the bill was trying to do. After the hearing, we understood that much better. And unfortunately, I think the legislators left that hearing with the impression that all you have to do is add a few inches of thickness of pavement to get a longer lasting pavement. You can get 50 or 100 years. But that's only part of the story. The big part of the story that's missing is that in Minnesota, a big factor of what determines pavement life is climate, and how our freeze-thaw cycles affect the top layer of the pavement, as well as extreme heat and the chemicals we use on the road. Not to mention that you can have a 50-year road, but if the utilities underneath it are a different age, you're going to have to bust up that road anyway. So I think there was a lot sort of missing. Of course, the bill didn't have its own standalone hearing in the Senate, so we didn't really get a chance to further discuss those issues. I think there's also a conception that if you just add more money to a road project, that it's going to give you a better value pavement. And that's not really the whole story either. You've got to pick, there could also be, I mentioned the environmental conditions, but over design, adding thickness or premium materials beyond what the traffic load requires will not give you proportional life gains, as well as lack of maintenance. If we're not maintaining our roads properly and if we don't, due to funding shortfalls, the road will also not last as long. And please be clear, I want to be clear that concrete roads require maintenance as well. It's not just asphalt. So, depending what our goal here is to avoid construction or getting a longer term, better value for our investment, there are different ways to look at it. I'd also like to remind the committee that since 2008, MnDOT has been required to perform LCCAs on all of their projects that are more than 2 inches in pavement. And so this is a robust process and statute that really is how we determine, it's a decision-making tool that evaluates the total cost of the road over the entire life, not just what it costs to build, but also to maintain, repair, and eventually replace. So we have a system in place to get at what is the best value and what the best solution for the road. As we kind of continued discussions on this legislation, we realized that MnDOT has a program in existence that does exactly what the Resilient Pavements Concretes Bill wants to do, called the Long-Term Pavement Performance Supplement. They've got $35 million programmed for 2028 and $39 million programmed for 2029. Those are to upgrade or upscale projects that were designed for maintenance into a longer-term fix. Out of the $74 million in those 2 years that are appropriated, $55 million of that goes to the concrete industry. So this is we're not advocating this program because it overly benefits us. It still doesn't, but it is more of a fairly designed program in our estimation. There are, out of the 7 projects, 4 of them are concrete and 3 of them are asphalt. Of course, the asphalt projects cost a lot less, so that's why you see the difference in dollar amounts. But it really brings up the issue of why are we creating a new program that seems to be biased for one pavement when there's already a program that is much more well-funded and has more objective criteria that already has a program planned. I think all of us clearly want to get to what the best value is and get the best value out of our pavements, the right solution for the right road. We have a huge system. This has been discussed. I think utilizing the Infrastructure Council chair that you just mentioned is where we need to start to talk about these issues. How can we avoid construction disruptions and do dig once policies? But also, I think that there's just clearly not consensus here about which science bears out. What's the best approach? How much money should we spend? Should it be in statute? We really think that this issue needs more discussion, and so we would recommend that nothing be codified at this time until all the stakeholders can get together and talk about how we can really get the best value, and make sure that we recognize what we're already doing. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Mr. LeBeau.
Thank you, Chair Cagle, co-chairs, and co-authors, many of which are here in the room of this legislation. My name is Dan LeBeau. I'm the Executive Director for the Concrete Paving Association of Minnesota. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time testifying. I'll be more open for questions. But really, I just want to remind everybody, as we discussed in our hearing in the House side, the purpose of this resilient paving program is to build on MnDOT's existing program, to build longer life roads by providing a little bit more money for, to fix the roads for a longer term fix. And with that, we have, of course, we had the committee meeting. We've worked with MnDOT over the last few months to talk about this in a transparent way to address their concerns. I know the Senate version on the sustainability ratio or the cost effectiveness ratio that was being lowered was a request of MnDOT. So we want to work with MnDOT and our partners where we all can, of course. But I did want to really highlight, one of the things is the existing MnDOT program that they have. It really puts money towards existing status quo fixes, which are generally 20 to 35-year fixes. And the resilient paving program looks for longer life fixes of 50 years. And so with that, I just conclude my testimony in the interest of time. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. If we could have MnDOT come up and talk about the program that's currently at MnDOT, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair and chairs and members. Again, my name is Nancy Daubenberger, and I'm the MnDOT Commissioner. And I will talk on the Resilient Pavement Program. I'll comment on that. So the program at hand here, the Resilient Pavement Program created in House and Senate bills really does somewhat mirror the existing long-term pavement performance supplement program that MnDOT currently has within our state road construction program. And that program provides funding to provide a longer-term scope of work, up-scope pavement projects from a shorter-term fix to a medium or longer-term fix. And these are projects for which we know a longer-term fix is preferred, but don't have sufficient funding otherwise within the program. So in order to maximize the amount of miles of pavement that can be constructed, projects must be on freeways or rural pavements, so not the urban or Main Street projects being in this program, because those tend to be much more expensive per mile. And our MnDOT districts submit projects which are scored using objective criteria like ride quality, service life, reactive maintenance, heavy commercial average traffic counts, and corridor continuity. And we currently set aside, as was mentioned, about $40 million per year of our National Highway Performance Program funding within our state road construction program for this effort. And so the Senate bill would provide an additional $10 million for the long-term pavement performance supplement program. Thank you, and I stand for questions.
Thank you. So what is in the House language or the Senate language that is different from the program that's currently being operated?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the Senate language, the additional $10 million would be provided to that program on top of what we have already planned for within our program. The House does not have that in their language.
I guess my question is more about the duties and the tasks on it. How would that differ from what we have in the language? Or is it, they're doing the exact same thing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. They very much mirror what we already do. I do have our pavement expert, our director of our Office of MnDOT's Materials and Road Research, Kurt Turgeon, here, if you'd like a little more detail on that.
That would be, yeah, that'd be great. I'm kind of curious about what we have in language here and what the program currently does. And so if we're, why we recreate the wheel. Welcome to the committee. If you could just state your name for the record.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm Kurt Turgeon, the Director of the Office of Materials and Road Research at MnDOT. Probably the one thing that is significantly different is that ratio that in the House language, the ratio, it's a new calculation. It's something that was created in this document. That comes out to be 2, and then when the Senate language came out, they realized, well, not really sure how this ratio will actually function. Then that was changed to 1 to make sure that we were at least doing as well as the original project, but not trying to kind kind of fudge the numbers to make them look maybe significantly better than what they may actually be. So that's the one number that jumps out in
So the
terms
main
of
difference
differences.
is the asset ratio piece and not so much the resilient pavement program piece?
Yeah, there's the
Okay.
ratio in there. I recall what it's called. One of them says it has to be 2, and one of them says it has to be 1.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yep, oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Senator
Johnson-
Dibble can go first.
Senator Dibble.
Madam Chair, I will defer to Senator Johnson Stewart because I was going to take a stab at trying to enumerate the differences, but I think she is familiar with the program that's kind of administrative in its origin over at MnDOT versus this, which we would put in statute.
Thank you. Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all. So the ratio that Mr. Turgeon's talking about is different than, there's another bill, the Senator Howe bill, which is the ASR. That is a different thing.
Okay.
In this bill, the language that was originally outlined specified in big picture that if, okay, when we design a pavement, we design for a specific number of years. If we wanted to design for a different number of years, let's say 50, and we compared the cost, we would take, I can't remember if it's the design life or if it's the cost that you divide. Kurt, do you remember?
I recall that you take the original project, design life times the cost, and
Then
then you
divide.
take the new project's design life times the cost, and you're trying to get a ratio of 2 to 1.
Yep.
I guess it's the other way around, but
But basically what it is saying that if you do these things and you result in a 2 times, like you're doing twice as much, you're getting twice as much for your money, then you would qualify for this. And then in meetings with MnDOT, we decided that 2 might be a little bit too much to ask, so we brought it down to 1. So that's in the resilient pavement language. In the long-term pavement performance program, and I'm sorry, Chair Cagle, I gave you that info pretty late, so I apologize. There is criteria that MnDOT's been using to determine if projects are eligible. I think maybe Commissioner Daubenberger didn't say, but they've been typically taking 10% of their paving budget towards this. And what MnDOT's been doing is assigning factors. So with the pavement, the resilient pavement, we look at an increase in service life as a measure of cost and years. Generally, over here on long-term pavement performance, they look at, they rate the pavement the projects based on the improvement in ride quality, service life, maintenance, heavy and commercial trucks, et cetera, and then contour or corridor continuity. So they're looking at it more from a systems approach than from a specific, this divided by this gives you this. So that I would consider the long-term pavement performance program to be good. However, it's much more subjective than this other one where you could do calculations, divide A by B and get some number. Although I will have to say that with pavement design, we can massage the numbers in a variety of ways to get numbers as needed. So just because I say one is subjective and one is objective, they're really both pretty subjective, but they approach things in different ways. And now I hand it back to Mr. Turgeon, who I've known for a long time and is way smarter than me on this.
Mr. Turgeon? Oh, I'm sorry, here, Chair Dibble?
If Mr. Turgeon had a response to Senator Johnson Stewart, I can wait.
Mr. Turgeon?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm an engineer, we're really good with numbers, is I think what she was saying, and if you give me an equation or something that I have to fit the numbers into, I can probably come up with a way to do that. So concentrating on ratios and things may not be in the best thing to do in legislation.
Thank you. Chair Dibble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just thought I would share with the committee and the public a little bit about, kind of what happened on the way of this bill getting from, committee to the floor to here and kind of what happened. with the funding that corresponded to the resilient pavement program that we had put in originally. So, so we learned along the way that MnDOT has this long-term pavement performance program already. We've had a lot of conversation about that. That came as kind of a surprise, and I'll just add editorially or parenthetically that it's curious when we find out about these things, that we didn't know about them before. And it makes me wonder how many kinds of things there are over at MnDOT that just kind of exist that we don't know about. Because I'll just say that it seems like when initiatives are launched, by policymakers here, sometimes we hear from the agency, can't be done, or we need a bunch of money, or, if we're going to do it, you're going to have to make us do it through law. But then we find out about all kinds of amazing, wonderful initiatives that are actually occurring over there that happen, just through administrative initiative, completely out of the view of the public and legislators. So, I'll just let that be said. So we're happy to hear that there is something along these lines. We had this idea of the resilient pavement program, long-term pavement performance program comes up and everyone says, nothing to see here, we're already doing it. So our thought was, perhaps what we could do going forward, if there's enough time in this legislative session, to codify, if you will, the long-term pavement performance program, use some of the elements of the resilient pavement program, and also perhaps address some of the limitations around which kinds of roadways could be invested in for this purpose. I think everyone probably agrees, and certainly the public agrees, if there's an opportunity to put in a little bit more money and get long-term life out of a particular roadway, it's worth it. We shouldn't be building roads that we know we're going to be coming back in, within a very short amount of time, and, interrupting everyone's travel to redo it. That's expensive, it's not cost-effective, it's disruptive to the community. And if we have the opportunity to build roads for a longer duration, let's do that, and let's do so with policy direction and with legislative authority, so that signals the commitment and the value that we bring to this discussion from the public to the agency that serves the public.
Thank you. Any further, Chair Koznick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple kind of clarifying questions. I appreciate the comments of Chair Dibble. The difference that I'm looking at between the long-term pavement program and what we have in both bills, if I understand it correctly, the long-term payment program, as the commissioner pointed out, is for short and medium-term fixes. We have line 82.27, at least 50 years for modified projects. The Senate 99.19 is their line of, again, identifying 50 years. Is 50 years considered long-term, short-term, medium-term? I think I'm pretty sure it's not short-term.
Madam Chair, Representative, right now our current design procedures for a concrete pavement, we would look at 35 years. The reason we look at that, as was mentioned earlier, I think by Abby, that at some point the thickness, the design procedures are dictating thickness. So how many loads is this going to carry? But then when you start looking at how our pavements age and deteriorate, a lot of it is, the environment. So to design for thickness for 50 years when we think maybe we'll have environmental problems before 50 years has always been a question that we've debated within the department. We have done a number of things with both industries to increase the quality of the materials and the uniformity of the products that they're placing, and I think we can. There are a lot of people who would be very anxious to say, we, MnDOT, can build you a brand new pavement that will definitely last 50 years. That's probably the reason that we don't have 50 years as our current standard.
Chair Koznick?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate those comments. And I've got two other ones. One is on the ratio, and then one is on the foundation. Is there a big difference? We talked about the House has 2%, the Senate has 1%. is a reasonable, is 1.5%, obviously the Minnesota nice reasonable compromise, is that, how does that affect what we were actually trying to do? Is that reasonable?
Mr. Turgeon?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative. We haven't really used that calculation in our day-to-day business, so I have a hesitation to really comment on it. So we don't use that ratio. What we've been using is this scoring system within the long-term pavement performance supplement that we've been identifying. Well, these are really good projects to spend more money on. The ratio is something that, we'll figure out a way to work with it one way or another, but 2 was definitely problematic.
Thank you. Chair Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then the other thing was the House, back to Mr. Turgeon, I believe, right? The House included in their payment foundation, I can't cite exactly where it is, but I know it's in there somewhere. How does that factor in? So we're talking asphalt, concrete, whatever, gravel if you wanted, but the subsurface, how does the pavement foundation play into that? Is that something that you find value in?
Mr. Turgeon?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative, that is part of the calculation. The native soils, the base, sub-base, gravel, and the pavement all go into the calculation of how thick should each of those layers be in order to achieve a certain design life.
Very good, and I see Senator Johnson Stewart
Senator Johnson.
showing some interest in that, and I'll just finish up with this, but I would be, maybe we could do it offline too. We've talked a little bit about it. But just to finish up then from my perspective on the long-term pavement program, the scoring criteria, like the surface life is at 20 points, but ride quality is at 40, so it seems kind of heavy on some things. Is the scoring on that, and I don't know if we're asking the right people, but I'm questioning if anybody that wants to provide input, is the scoring on that long-term payment program reflective of what we want to do or try to do is extend the life of a road when we repurpose it or build it? And so if you have some comments on that, that would be my final question, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Representative, so we've done this once. And we've already changed the scoring from the first time to what you've seen now. And I think we are still open to the idea of changing the scoring and ranking things differently and looking at how various changes to the scores. Some of the suggestions came from Senator Stewart, and we ran through some of those numbers, and I've got the asphalt and concrete next to me, and some of them changed and tip it this way, and some of it changes tip it that way. We try to be non-confrontational with both industries, so we're open to the idea of changing them, but understand that changing them would impact one or the other industry when that happens.
I think we'll just, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we'll just let the comments marinate for a little bit, but I appreciate them. I think it gives us a lot to think about if we are switching from the intention of the language that we have in both of our bills to something different that's existing, and I appreciate that it is existing. As Senator Dibble said, MnDOT's looking at it, but I'm not sure that it's hitting the mark. So thank you for the comments and the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Koznick. Senator Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, is it Master Chair? Mr. Chair. So just briefly, because I was the prime author here, and I appreciate Representative Koznick and Cagle and Dibble all working on this. The challenge is, so when a pavement engineer, regardless of who they work for, when they design a pavement, so Mr. Turgeon said concrete is designed for 35 years. Asphalt, we generally use a 20-year design life, but we can't compare that because concrete would always lose, right? If you say, well, but it's going to last 35 years. So then we bring it back to something called a LCCA, is life cycle cost analysis. So we say, what is the life cycle cost? Understanding that asphalt and concrete pavement surfaces have different maintenance and different costs. We know those costs very accurately because MnDOT keeps track every year how many pounds of sealant they put down, and how many square feet of crack, and all, you know, all the things. So the challenge is that when we're looking at optimizing government spending, we want to pick the most efficient. I mean, hats off to MnDOT and City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, all those. We want to pick the most cost-effective solution. However, sometimes we need to, and sometimes I need to, I'm going to turn this in on myself, I think it's appropriate to look at other costs. So yes, pavement costs money, sealant costs money, all the things, but the other things that cost money are you know, business interruptions and people's time as they wait on 35 for yet one more concrete mill and overlay or whatever, or one, you know, white topping or asphalt or chip seal, whatever it is. So sometimes we might want to be able to pick that we have a really high volume road here. I mean, if some of you have been in this body for a long time, how many times has 94 been under construction? Like, if we could stretch that out a little bit, right? So if MnDOT could have the ability to stretch out and design for a 50-year life, which both asphalt and concrete are capable of, it would be thicker pavement, but also, to your point, heavier base course, all of that. And so I think that's really important. And so it's a different approach. We're not designing for necessarily the cheap or the most efficient life cycle cost. We are considering other factors. And Mr. Turgeon and I have already gone back and forth on the scoring because, again, I'm not necessarily in agreement that it shouldn't be used for rural downtowns. There are a lot of downtowns that have you know, a state trunk highway right through the main street, and the cost to those businesses is significant. So that was the genesis. I really appreciate the interest, and everybody you see at that table is very committed to working out a solution, which I feel like we can do. So that's the last I'm going to speak today. Sorry.
Senator Jasinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we've had great discussion. You know, it reminds me of a Chevy dealership talking to a Ford dealership and trying to sell one truck and say which one's better than the other. And they're always going to compete. There's so many different things. One could have better electronics. One could have better drivetrain. And there's so many things you're comparing, and it gets so you could, you know, push it one way or another. But in just watching what I've seen, MnDOT has district engineers, and they look at all these things themselves, and maybe one area is more prone for bituminous because they have a plant there, one's more concrete because they have a company there. It gets political. There's different companies in different towns and different areas of the region, so you're going back and forth. I mean, these are good design centers to look at, but I think every district engineer in MnDOT is looking at all these things together and making the best decision what they can do. And again, the thicker is better, I'm assuming, that's better, and it'll last longer, but again, with the freeze thaw and all the other things going on, this is good input, but it's still, I don't think you'll ever agree on anything. It's back and forth. It's, you know, Chevy versus the Ford and which one's better, concrete versus blacktop. Since I've been up here 9 years, we've been talking about blacktop and concrete with those conflicting things as well. So I like the study, looking at it, but I think if MnDOT's already doing it, I think MnDOT engineers are paid to look at these things and make these determinations district by district. It obviously goes through State Central, look at the overall plan for the whole state, but I think individually each district engineer is looking at these things every day. So thank you.
And it's Ford. Ford's the better one.
I'll let that one go.
I'm a Ford gal, sorry. Mr. LeBeau.
Yeah, a couple, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple closing comments anyway on my end. I just did want to really emphasize that the differences between these bills is really the kind of the crux of it is that 50-year design. And, you know, you go look at it, does it make sense to build everyone a 50-year design? Obviously not. But if you ask those businesses and residents on Robert Street that's coming up, whether they want a 50-year road or a 20-year road, I think they may have some opinion on that. And kind of with that too, you know, we really do need to, you know, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart's comment is we really need to consider the business impacts as well, because the existing program doesn't factor that in, for example. You know, and currently you know, the program also is focused on achieving smooth roads, not necessarily long-lasting roads. So if you pave it smooth and it only lasts 5 years, is that really a good investment? That's a question we need to kind of answer. And then I also wanted to say, you know, it really does focus on increasing the service life, and under the bill, it would need to be at least 2.5 times more service life than the status quo. And then also I'd like to add on the existing program where, you know, we really do need to, I think both industries agree that we need to consider cost effectiveness, whether by a cost effectiveness ratio or life cycle cost analysis. Obviously, Senator Jasinski is well familiar with our life cycle cost discussions. And, you know, and really we also need to remember too that this MnDOT program, the terms of which can change at the whim of MnDOT. And kind of the cool thing is about legislation is it does inspire things. And to Senator Cagle, or Representative Cagle's, you know, is familiar with this program long-term, but the original language of this program predated MnDOT's program. And I'd just like to add that I think MnDOT saw the wisdom and the value of thinking more long-term, and I think that was part of the inspiration for it. And then lastly, I just did want to say that as to Senator Dibble's point, you know, MnDOT recently published a report about how much of a funding shortfall that we actually have as a state transportation network to the tune of, I believe it's just over $1 billion per year. And so fundamentally, we kind of know that the mix of fixes is both fiscally and environmentally not sustainable. And so I think this, by pushing the envelope to incentivize these long-term thinking, it'll help us build more cost-effective roads in the future.
Thank you, Mr. LeBeau. Any further testimony or questions on this issue? Thank you. It seems like we have a program that we can work with. We might just need to modify it a bit. And so I appreciate your testimony. Thank you so much. We do have the asset ratio or asset sustainability ratio targets. If Mr. Burris, would you be willing to walk through the comparisons of that language?
Madam Chair and members, the House and Senate both have a asset sustainability ratio target provision. This is found in the side-by-side on page R109. It is House Section 45, Senate Section 63. Both House and Senate lay out requirements for calculating and establishing a target as well as a timeline for what that minimum target is over a series of years. The core difference between House and Senate language is where that timeline is set out. So on the House side, the first year in which the requirements go into effect is for 2027. And that, if you're looking at the side-by-side language, is on House line 76.30. The Senate has a delay in the implementation requirements. So on Senate side, 98.22, the requirements start in 2031. Both House and Senate have the same timeline as far as the ratio increasing every 2 years. So in both House and Senate, it starts at 0.65 as the ratio goal, and then scales up to 0.85. It's just the timing of when House versus Senate requirements go into effect. There are a couple other differences between the House and Senate in the language. The first of those, I believe, are technical clarifications on the House side in identifying how the calculation is determined. That's in establishing what the numerator and denominator are for the asset sustainability ratio. That's 76.27 to 76.28 on the House side, and 98.19 to 98.20 on the Senate side. I believe that the substantive ratio calculation is the same between the two. It's just some clarifying language on that. There's also a difference in paragraph C. It's both paragraph C of House and Senate in the reporting. The House language has some other reporting changes that are being made elsewhere in the bill. And so the as a portion of that, the report where asset sustainability ratio information is being required is shifted to a different location. On the Senate side, there's a reporting that is a performance report that's actually being eliminated or kind of moved in the House. So the location of the reporting is different report spots, but both House and Senate require some reporting information. And then finally, there's a difference in effective date that kind of goes along with the timeline for implementation requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. Is there anybody that wants to testify on the asset ratio portion?
Madam Chair.
Senator Dibble, please come up.
Looks like the agency is coming forward. That's what I was going to ask.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Because, Madam Chair,
And please come to the testifier's table as well.
so Madam Chair, if I could.
Yep.
Our delayed effective dates were in response to, I think, what we're just about to hear about from the Department of Transportation, who saw this as having a fairly substantial effect on the totality of their program, including reaching into some of what they do and, even outside the trunk highway system. And so we're just like, kind of had a little shock when we got that analysis and response. We thought we wanted to keep the discussion in the bill, but didn't want to necessarily take on a big financial impact if that was in fact the case. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Commissioner Dobbenberger, if you'd like to address Chair Dibble's concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Dibble, and Chair Kosnick, and members. Again, Nancy Dobbenberger, MnDOT Commissioner, and thanks for letting me provide some comments on the asset sustainability ratio provision in the bill. And, again, MnDOT values partnerships we have with Concrete Paving Association, the Minnesota Asphalt Pavers Association, and the Aggregate and Ready Mix Association, Minnesota. We need all these industries to be strong and competitive as we build and maintain a multimodal transportation system. As I've previously described, the asset sustainability ratio provision will have significant impacts to our trunk highway program. It requires shifting resources away from investments in bridges, freight, safety, and other projects than currently planned. And meeting the proposed targets in the House bill would result in immediate substantial changes to our construction program. Approximately 175 to 240 million annually would be needed to shift to pavement projects to meet these requirements. The 8-year total impact is between $1.4 billion to $1.9 billion. It required moving non-pavement projects from the State Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, that in some cases have already been scoped and started public engagement, excuse me. The Senate adjusted the effective date for this asset sustainability ratio provision, as Senator Dibble was just describing. And while this change means we would not have to shift projects within the STIP, we would estimate it would require an increase between $260 million to $320 million for pavements, or $65 to $80 million per year on average during the 4 years of 2031 to 2034. And while we have not yet identified specific projects that would need to be canceled or delayed, some examples of planned spending that would have to be reduced in order to meet the asset sustainability ratio targets would be for bridge condition. In the Senate annual reduction, or the times 4 years, this would be $122 million, or 11% reduction. In the House, the annual reduction times 8 would be $75 million, or 27%. Roadside infrastructure, again with the Senate annual reduction, $58 million, or 11%. House annual reduction, $35 million, or 28%. For safety, $25 million, or 7.5% in the Senate, and $16 million, or 18% in the House. Mobility, $24 million, or 5% reduction in the Senate, and $15 million, or 13% reduction with the House bill. And freight, $15 million, or 11% reduction in the Senate bill. And for freight in the House bill, that's $9 million, or 26% reduction. And these changes would contradict the investment direction that's been identified for our 20-year Minnesota State Highway Improvement Program, or Investment Program, our MNSHIP as we call it, through the public process that's required per Minnesota State Statute 174.03. So when we ask Minnesotans for their input, they certainly value smooth pavements, but we also hear very clearly from them that we must maintain other components of our transportation system. Another funding category for which this could be taken is from other pavement projects, doing thin overlays, but then we'd need to be out there more often on those project areas in order to keep up with our pavement smoothness and our pavement condition performance measures. So that would be more frequent construction in those project areas compared to the programs or the projects where we'd put the additional longer-term fix. So with that, I think I've answered the questions, but I stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you could just please, Sir, identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
So thank you, Chair Cagle, and thanks for sponsoring this legislation. My name is Glenn Engstrom. I work for the Aggregate Ready-Mix Association, Minnesota. Before that, 30 years of MnDOT. And I'll give you a little history on how this came up. 10 years ago, when I had Mr. Turgeon's job, my boss at the time said, Glenn, how much does it take to keep up with deterioration of our pavements? I need to know this to make plans. So we started looking at stuff and measures, et cetera. And the ASR, Asset Sustainability Ratio, came up as a good way to look at system-wide how you're doing with deterioration. And we took that from state of Washington, and some other states were using it at the time. Now, to be clear, they weren't using it as a target. They were using it as a measure to determine where they're at. So we started looking at that, and I remember the pavement management engineer at the time was a little skeptical about how we're going to use this. And he said, well, you know, Glenn, we need to probably hit about 700 miles a year to keep up, approximately. And I ran some calculations recently, and that turns out, again, depends upon the mix of fixes you got, but that asset sustainability ratio for that would be about 0.7 at the time. And MnDOT has done a great job. In fact, the pavement condition right now is the best it's been in many, many, many years. So thanks to MnDOT for doing that. But the targets, so again, it's all about keeping up with normal deterioration. And the targets that we put down in the bill are actually based upon MnDOT data out of the CHIP 10-year program that was done in 22. Now, granted, it's 3 years old, but at the time, I've got the sheet right in front of me. The CHIP was saying in 27, assets ratio is going to be 0.65. That's what we put down. 29, it says 0.79. So we put down 0.75. And in 31, it says 0.82. Okay, you got me there. We had 0.85. But we thought these targets were legitimate. And yes, it could take more money, but I also think that a lot of things could be done that aren't being done currently to improve the condition of our pavements. The pavement investment guide that's in statute now, I think it was 3 years ago, was put in statute. That can be used to help this, make better decisions on what pavements we use. There's a pavement preservation manual. And again, back when I was with MnDOT, we set goals for pavement preservation. How are we going to use crack sealing program, chip sealing program? MnDOT, again, has got wonderful people that know how to do this. They've got an engineer there that I talked to a couple months ago and asked him, how are you coming with pavement preservation? Well, we're struggling. We're struggling to get these done. It's basically a user's manual for pavements like your car. You change oil every 3,000 miles. With pavements, you crack seal, you chip seal, et cetera, to extend that pavement life at a much more reasonable price than reconstruction. We also think technical innovation needs to be optimized. Min-Road Project doing a lot of great work there. In my opinion, and I'll take credit, I should have done this when I had Kurt's job. Should have developed a strategic plan for implementation of research. We spent a lot of money on research. Let's go here. Let's use it. So there are a variety of things that can be done that aren't going to cost the kind of money that the commissioner mentioned. I think bottom line, This is all about change and innovation. Hitting these targets, the old do more with less, we've all heard forever. But I really believe that would help move the needle as much as more funding. Granted, probably more funding is going to have to be used, but I think one of the main things we need to do, and taxpayers expect, is to keep our existing infrastructure in good condition, and that's bridges, and that's retaining walls, and that's ADA, pavements, everything. So this is just a measure to, and it's some minimum values. We're not at 1, we're at 0.65, et cetera. And I obviously am passionate about this, and I believe there's a lot of things in industry. Speaking for industry, we've had both MAPA and CPAM on board with this, both industries, both Ford and Chevys, and maybe we'll throw in some Toyotas here too. But they see the issues, and they're ready to help out with new technology. And again, MnDOT's done a great job with new technology, whether it's in concrete, intelligent construction, and asphalt. A lot of things. MnDOT has a lot of tools that they can use to improve our pavement. So with that, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Turgeon, do you have anything to add or just there for questions?
I'm just here for questions.
Okay, thank you. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, so some of us in the public may be sitting here scratching our heads because the term asset sustainability ratio really hasn't been defined or explained. A lot of lingo, a lot of jargon. I'm going to toss the ball over to my engineering friend. We have an engineer in the room in case
You're
people didn't know that.
Really?
But
yes,
I thought
claim
would
it
just,
today.
I went to the Googles, and I just thought I would read a couple of things just to kind of get a baseline of knowledge. An asset sustainability ratio is a metric used to assess how well an organization's assets are being maintained and replaced over time. Obviously, that's what we're talking about. It's calculated by comparing capital expenditures on asset renewal or replacement to depreciation expense. A ratio of 1 or greater suggests the organization is adequately replacing assets as they reach the end of their useful lives, while a lower ratio indicates potential asset depreciation, degradation, all the things. So the capital expenditure on renewal or replacement includes the spending on maintaining or replacing assets to prevent them from reaching the end of their useful lives. Depreciation expense represents the estimated reduction in the value of the assets due to their consumption or use over time. Standard understanding of depreciation. An ASR of 1 means that the expenditures are sufficient to maintain the current value. Less than 1, the system is likely to lose value as the organization isn't spending enough to maintain asset values. Greater than 1, the system is likely to gain value as the organization is spending more than needed to maintain asset values. It helps with long-term financial planning, performance monitoring, benchmarking. Transportation agencies propose using the ASR as a key indicator of highway infrastructure sustainability with separate ratios for pavements, bridges, and maintenance.
Thank you.
That's today's lesson. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Johnson Stewart, did you want to add to?
No, Senator Dibble, that was excellent. But what I just want to point out, I think this is a worthy thing for us to be talking about. Assets are great if they don't require maintenance, but if we continue to gain assets, but we don't plan for their maintenance or how we keep their value, then that is really a problem. Many of you know that I acquired a free tavern in northern Wisconsin, which was such a great deal that ended up costing me $300,000. Like, think of somebody giving you a mansion and saying, here, and you think, wow, it's great. But now you own that asset. If you don't keep it up, it will become more of a liability. And Mr. Engstrom, thank you, because it's really a smart thing to consider that our pavements are an asset, but because they're an asset, we have to keep them up. And, crack repair and crack seal and chip seals and all that, that's not very fun because it doesn't really add to anything. So people like to add to a system but not maintain it. And so while this is a tough pill to swallow, and by the way, I've asked MnDOT for their numbers so that we can be more understanding of how they came up with their values, I think it's really good. And it's painful, but I really encourage our committee to take it seriously, and I thank MnDOT for their work in this area. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other, Chair Kosnick?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I've looked at this and discussed it with the department, so thank you for that discussion earlier. And just kind of looking at the two differences, approaches, prolonging when we start taking a look at the ratio, or start now and recognize that we're not keeping up or maintaining our assets. I'm kind of inclined to start earlier in knowing that we're not going to meet the levels that are listed in the House language, but still starting to understand that we're not maintaining this important asset, but work with the department to potentially lower where our targets are and build up over time. And I know it will take more time than, many of us might even be here, 4 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, so that down, a decade from now, rather than the current projections for MnDOT, in case you didn't know, for 2027 is 0.26. And in the House language, we have 0.65. So very different levels of maintaining. But so if we understood where we're at, and maybe in 10 years, and we continue to make better investments, that we can actually work towards better maintaining and more smartly maintaining our infrastructure. So that's something that I had looked at with the department's concerns, so I appreciate your concerns have been heard. I think it's an important metrics, and I understand that there's a cost to it if we were to jump it up, and I share that concern to a certain extent, but I think it's important to maintain and understand where we're at, and so hopefully we can measure down the road that we've made some progress. And if we haven't, we've all got some big problems, but that would be important for me to kind of have in the bill to kind of understand where we're measuring.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this topic? Oh, Chair Dibble?
Madam Chair, if I could ask the agency, and if you think you've already expressed this, I apologize, so just express it again. What is the metric that the agency uses? I mean, do we know our current ASR? And is that something that informs the programs, the activities, whether that's substantial rehabilitation, new lane miles, the maintenance program? Is that driven by the ASR, an overall metric that we're trying to accomplish and achieve? Does it also inform, to Senator Johnson-Stewart's point, if we're going to be taking on new facilities, is the future maintenance replacement cost factored in so as to not threaten an ASR target and goal for the agency? I mean, is this a useful metric that we already pay attention to, or not?
Commissioner Dobbenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Chair Dibble. Yes, this is a value that, as Mr. Engstrom described, he spearheaded when he was with the department, and we have been calculating this. So we have a calculation. We could report on this to the legislature each year with it informing how much additional investments are needed in pavements from here on out. And so we do have those numbers. When it comes to pavement investments, and Chair Dibble, I think what you're getting at is how do we decide how much investment to put towards pavements in general, and that does come through our Minnesota State Highway Investment Plan that gets updated every 5 years, and it's through public input and other data that the department has on how much is needed in these investment areas and how much revenue is coming in, how much we have to spend in these different investment areas. And maybe then from there, I should defer to Mr. Turgeon to talk further about then how money is identified for different pavement projects.
Mr. Turgeon?
Well, Madam Chair, members of the committee, We rely, as was mentioned earlier, we rely on the districts to find the best projects and to fix the things that need to be fixed locally. And we have, as an organization, looked more on a project-by-project basis and less on a network-wide basis, which is some of the things that Glenn tried to change when he was there and some of the things we're trying to continue. One of the types of projects that Senator Johnson mentioned is these downtown reconstructs are extremely expensive and you only get very few miles. And they are the worst thing to do for the asset sustainability ratio because you spend so much money and you only go so far. The way to really impact this number is to do a minimum or do as many miles as possible. And in fact, in a lot of ways, doing more miles is much more important than doing long-term fixes, which is sort of different than the conversation we just had with the long-term pavement supplement. There are funds, there are types of projects that are used in this calculation. Pavement preservation, crack sealing, chip sealing are not included in this calculation. So in this calculation, if you want to, if you're looking for places to get money from, you might end up stealing money from your pavement preservation budget to put it into a thin overlay budget so you could get more miles that fit within this one calculation. And that's probably the biggest hang up here for the department with this bill is this is one parameter. And as a bunch of engineers, if you give us one number and tell us to meet that one number, we may not make the kinds of decisions we should be making, but we will meet that number. And that's probably the concern I have with this is 0.26 is way too low, but under what circumstances and what are we going to truly have to change in order to meet this number that's now going to be in statute? I don't know what the outcome might be.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, we really appreciate your testimony. Next up, we'll be doing the, talking about the Office of Traffic Safety. Where's my sheet here? All right, we have the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety. So the summary of this is that it revises duties and authority for the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety, authorizes the Department of Public Safety to assist the council to make grants, and of note, there are appropriation differences between the House and Senate position. Mr. Greenfield, would you like to walk through this side by side?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Conference Committee. That's correct that there are some grant-making differences. Of note, I'll be picking up the majority of the changes on R52 of the side-by-side document. So on R52 of the side-by-side document, the House and Senate language first differ in terms of the kind of the effective date of the first section in the Transportation, Finance, and Policy article. The Senate makes effective the authority of the Advisory Council on the Traffic Safety to advise the Commissioner of Public Safety immediately upon final enactment, or the day following final enactment. The House's position would be effective July 1, 2025. Section 2 is the administration provisions for the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety. The Senate and House take a few different policy differences in terms of that language. The Senate authorizes the Advisory Council to host an annual traffic safety conference on page 48, lines 27 and 28. The substantive differences begin on page 44, lines 21 of the House bill, and page 49, line 7 of the Senate bill. There is a verb choice difference there on line 44.22 and 49.8 about what the purpose of the contracts and agreements that may be formed between the Advisory Council on the Traffic Safety and to inform the Advisory Council's actions and responsibility and administration and review of safety policies. Then at the bottom of R52 and on to R53, this breaks out the kind of the specific uses of funds for these contracts and establishes a prioritization mechanism that requires on the Senate side, kind of going from R52 to R53, that local traffic safety coalitions should get priority for grant awards, and then local units of government, nonprofit organizations, law enforcement agencies, and educational institutions are secondary in terms of that preference, but also eligible for grant awards. Whereas the House language says they must give priority to local safety traffic organizations, so it is a kind of a technical reordering difference, but I think putting it first maybe potentially changes the operational mechanics of it. I'm not entirely sure. And then on R53 from lines 49.13 on the Senate side to 49.21, this specifies the projects that the contracts may be awarded for, the grant awards, including improvements to rural high-risk roads, traffic safety training for law enforcement, sober ride programming, the study of lane filtering operations, work zone safety and work zone redesign activities, and safe road zones, which is a statutory program for local units to petition for a designation of a certain road segment to be designated as a safe road zone. And again, separate from the House, the Senate section is effective the day following final enactment versus July 1, 2025.
Thank you. Could we please have Director Hansen and Paul Hassan come up to the
And Madam Chair, if I could just ask a follow-up to
Chair
Council there.
Kosnick.
Mr. Greenfield, on line 49.18 of the Senate, did you say that that was for a study of the lane splitting provision? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. And Madam Chair, that's correct.
All right. Thank you for coming today. If you could just state your name for the record, and then I would love to hear your take on the language and the differences that you see. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Chair Dibble and Chair Kosnick as well for the opportunity to talk with you today about the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety. I'll keep some opening remarks rather brief so we have time for questions and answers. And I know it's been kind of a long afternoon already. But I think most of you on this committee remember that the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety was formed as a result of legislative action in 2023. And what prompted the Advisory Council's formation was the exponential increase in the number of fatal and serious crashes that we were experiencing in Minnesota and essentially across the country at that time. Starting in 2020, we started to see significant upticks in the amount of dangerous, high-risk driving taking place on our roads, and as a result, the crashes, deaths, and injuries that resulted from that. In 2023, then, the Advisory Council was established, and it is an example of, I guess, what I would call good government at work, because it really brings all of the stakeholders that are involved in the statewide Towards Zero Deaths program together. The Department of Public Safety, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Health are the three primary agencies. But in addition to that, the Advisory Council brings together over 30 other interest groups that have a direct impact on traffic safety at the local and county and state level, and allows us to share information, to share ideas, to strategize and find ways that we can make progress in driving those numbers down to zero, which is our ultimate goal. So the Advisory Council also provides us with the opportunity, and when I say us, the traffic safety stakeholders in the state, to provide information, guidance, policy information to the legislature and to the governor so that we can work together to, again, implement the policies that will save lives and prevent serious injuries from happening. So it's a good operation. It's taken us a little bit of time to get things up and running, but so far, so good. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions or turn it over to Mr. Hassan for some comments.
Director Hansen, could you please just state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Members, my name is Mike Hansen. I have the privilege of serving as the Director for the Department of Public Safety's Office of Traffic Safety.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last name. If you'd like to introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Madam Chair,
Chairs Kosnick, Dibble, and members. My name is Paul Ossen. I'm with the Minnesota Safety Council. I'm wearing two hats here today. One is the Minnesota Safety Council as a partner in this traffic safety effort. The other is a member of the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety. I think what's in front of you in terms of policy changes are valuable on two fronts. One is both bodies are attempting to address some of the administrative challenges that the Advisory Council has had, straighten out that grant-making authority, and sort out that path. That's very important because as this bill is structured, a little bit different than the one in 2023, the money is all moving through the Advisory Council process, so that would be critical. The second is that the laundry list of potential uses for the money that is included specifically in the Senate language essentially carries forward the intent of the 2023 legislation. Some of those appropriations were direct to MnDOT and DPS in 2023, some to the Advisory Council indirectly through DPS. This puts it all in one place, and we believe there's value in continuing those threads of work on rural high-risk roadways, on training law enforcement, on extra enforcement sweeps, on things like the Safe and Sober Rides Home. So we believe there's value in this work and continuing that kind of policy work moving forward.
Thank you. Any discussion from the members of the committee? Chair Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I thought I would just expand a little bit on what Mr. Ossen just touched upon in that enumerated list under on paragraph H, the 6 eligible or the kind of the activities. It's not limiting, of course. It's not limited to the following activities, but it is kind of carrying forward those things that were identified in the 2023 legislation when we kind of revitalized and reconstituted the advisory committee and the office, et cetera. So that's where those programs come from, except for, of course, number 4 that Representative Kosnick asked about. Members might be aware that, we green-lighted lane splitting, lane filtering last year, and this year we're putting a little bit of a hesitation, a little pause. Some concerns have been articulated from some quarters, and there is, ongoing discussion and disagreement around whether or not that's a safe activity, under what circumstances it's safe, et cetera. And so we thought we would ask the Safety Office and the Safety Advisory Committee to take a look at that and get some information back to us. So that just kind of got dropped in from the clear blue sky, if you will. And then, the other piece that I think we both aspire to repair or fix or address is the frustration that we feel and the office feels and the public feels that we had appropriated some money for grant making and then discovered that the office and the advisory council felt like they didn't have the right kind of language to actually make those grants. So, I won't revisit history who knew what and when and why didn't we hear about this sooner, why this money hasn't gotten out on the street, but I won't mention that. Let's just get the money out on the street to get the research and get the programs and the help that we intended in 2023. Thanks.
Thank you. So one of my questions maybe is it just policy differences between the House and Senate, or is there any fiscal implications to that? Ms. Boyd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are a couple fiscal differences between the House and the Senate. One is in the ongoing appropriations starting in fiscal year 26. The base amount for this, the Advisory Council was $2 million a year from the general fund. The House has a reduction of $1 million a year to that base, and the Senate has a reduction of $500,000 a year to that base. And then also in the carry forward amounts from fiscal year 24 and 25, the Senate has an extension of the availability of the remaining appropriation from the current biennium, and the House actually cancels the estimated remainder of those unexpended funds. I believe it's listed at $3.25 million, cancellation of the $4 million. I don't know if Mr. Lee wants to expound on that, but.
Mr. Lee?
Madam Chair and members, yes, Ms. Boyd said it right. The House has a cancellation of $3.25 million.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion to the topic? No? You didn't have anything to say about lane splitting, Chair Costing?
Well, if you're going to ask, I support the previous legislation and, just for consistency to the public, going back and forth, I think causes some concern, but.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to testify on the Traffic Safety Advisory Council issues? Seeing none, then, I appreciate your testimony. We'll definitely take that into consideration. And so just another order of business here. There is in the packets, Transportation Finance Conference Committee provisions for consideration. These are just some of the technical or department initiatives, and we were hoping to get a look at these and then, pass some of these same and similars so that we would be able to start building a bill. But from my understanding, Chair Kosnick, you and your side of the table is not ready to take this yet?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping that, we can get some agreement on some of these provisions soon, so that we can get staff working on it. I think the longer we wait on adopting some of the provisions, the more of a time crunch we're putting our staff in the revisor's office in. So I'm hoping that, on the next meeting, we can really adopt some of these same and similars. Some of them are just like the turnbacks, the 60-day temporary permit vehicle, which I believe was a Olson bill, revising intersections, traffic control signal regulations, evidence of name changes, driver's license revocation changes, technical cross-reference changes, stuff about unmanned aircraft events, electronic ascension of aircraft registration, and safety traffic violation dispensation analysis. And so those are the ones that we both have in our bill that have pretty much the same language. So I'm making a strong plea that we adopt that next time so we can start allowing our staff to draft the bills. Any further comment, Chair Dibble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may ask Representative Kosnick. Representative Kosnick, do you need more information, or is there a reason why we can't just adopt these? I think Senator Jasinski advocated very strongly that we adopt the same and similars. This is a very similar list to the same and similars we brought in a few days ago. This was communicated last Saturday by Mr. Baumann. So we've had some time to look at these and consider them. Is there more information there's needed, or is just an unwillingness to adopt any provisions at this time? And I'll just be very transparent. Reports are coming in from other conference committees that the Republican House is resisting adopting any provisions, even the simplest sames and similars. Is there a larger reason going on that I'm unaware of, or is there something specific to this list of items that we need to, is there more information we need so that you would feel ready to adopt some of the easy stuff so we can start building a bill?
Chair Kosnick.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comment, and I think it's a serious question. There is no overreaching directive or anything. For us, I unfortunately didn't see this until before last night that we were putting it up here. So it's just that, in addition to hoping to get some targets even yet today. I'm optimistic from a comment that I had with the governor, but that's a little bit above us. But they are very similar, so I don't know that it would really effectively create a lot of extra space in terms of overall putting a bill together. But as I mentioned last week, am available almost around the clock to do a bill and get stuff together. So this is a start, but not direly consequential to putting a bill together. I think it, more productive time or whatever, or additionally to conference committee time, would just to sit down and appreciate the time that we did have over the weekend. Senator Dibble and I just briefly just to kind of talk in a roundabout overarching structure and ideas, not too specific, but I did appreciate that time, and I think with the chairs, we could have more time. We're going to start meeting tomorrow morning, I understand, with the governor's office and that, and I think that'll be more productive as well, or at least that's my hope. And so there is no general directive coming down or anything like that, Senator Dibble. Just not comfortable at this point.
Mr. Chair Dibble.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, and makes me feel better. And I appreciated our opportunity to talk last night as well. And in my district, enjoying a delicious Colombian fare. I got to walk to the restaurant because it was so close. And then we heard very, very loud Colombian music. We had to shout at each other.
Senator Dibble, I thought you were angry at me.
So just to let everyone know on this committee as well as the public, I'll be bringing this list back as an offer, and probably add my other stuff that I had from last week to it. You know, I would advocate. I agree, not super consequential necessarily to the bill, other than, you know, I'm sure some people care a lot about these provisions, but in terms of the overall bill, we've got, you know, bigger fish to fry certainly. But it does accomplish two things. One, it kind of gets us going. We feel good. We get some provisions adopted. We're feeling good about each other. It's awesome. And it also gets some work shipped over to the reviser, and they can start putting some stuff together so that they're not inundated with a big dump at the last moment. I'm happy to hear that you think targets might be impending soon. I think if we don't have targets by tomorrow, I mean, I just can't imagine that we'll get our work done before adjournment dates. But I would really love for us, because I feel like we can bring this bill together fairly quickly, as we've discussed, and get ahead of the scrum, you know, and not have to worry about, you know, overtime or, you know, getting caught up in, you know, the bigger contests out there like HHS and who knows what else. So, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also encourage all of us in this time, we know this is crunch time, please be checking texts and emails because, yeah, this did come out on Saturday, and there was plenty of time to look over it. So seeing no other business before the committee, did we have any minutes that we needed to adopt or anything? No? Okay.
I did have one question, if I could.
Chair Cosnick, go ahead.
Just generally to what I think you're trying to figure out when we're going to meet next and that kind of stuff. Just the rotation of the chairs, I think it was appropriate to have three chairs, the first three meetings rotate that way. But do we generally, whether we meet or not, a chair is assigned for that day and it's their choice? Is that generally how we do it? What, you know, maybe council has some guidelines, or how does that, where is that authorized from?
From my understanding of the agreement, it would rotate House, Senate, and then we would have to rotate those House days. So you and I would get a gavel every third day, where Senator Dibble would get the gavel every other meeting. And under our rules, I do believe that the gavel turns over every 24 hours, no matter if there is a meeting called or not. But I will leave that up to council to correct me if I'm wrong.
And Madam Chair, that was my understanding as well. So, you know, Senator Dibble extended the courtesy for you to chair this meeting, which I think, if I recall, would have actually been my opportunity to chair the meeting.
No, actually, it would be Senator Dibble's, because I would have had Saturday.
Tomorrow would have been, then tomorrow would be House Republicans' opportunity, but we can talk about that as chairs. But I just wanted to, that was my understanding, but I wanted to have some conversation about it. So since you were talking about the next meeting, that's why I wanted to bring it up.
And I think it would be good if we kept the schedule that House, Senate. And, you know, we were given the grace to have this committee hearing a House gavel on a day that was supposed to be a Senate one. And so I would say that we just keep going back and forth. Chair Dibble, you were going to make a comment?
So Senator Representative Koznick is correct that Saturday would have been a House day. We decided not to meet Saturday, so today would have been my day. So we decided to make that a House day. Tomorrow would technically be a House day. You know, if you decide you want to exercise your prerogative to chair tomorrow, I'm totally comfortable with that. And if you want to do that, that's fine. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Senator Dibble, by the way,
Chair
those that
Koznick.
didn't, in the public, I said we can work it out. That is the House song for the tax committee. We can work it out. So I probably owe him a copy right now.
Any other comments or questions for the committee? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.